Have you ever had that feeling, maybe you're at a dinner party or just, in the break room at work, where you catch yourself performing? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You're nodding along with something you don't actually agree with or laughing at a joke that isn't funny just to keep things smooth. We call it the public mask.
We all do it. It's kind of the lubricant of social interaction, right? If
Yep.
everyone said exactly what they were thinking all the time, society might just grind to a halt.
Right, exactly. And it's usually harmless. But today, for our deep dive, we are looking at a source that argues this gap, the one between the public mask and our private reality, isn't just about being polite.
No, it argues that for a specific segment of the American population, that gap is hiding a terrifying ideology.
It really is.
The text we're looking at is titled Beyond the Veil, Narcissism and Racial Exile in America. And I think we should be clear right from the start. This is not a light listen. The source material is dense, it's very psychological, and it's incredibly provocative.
Provocative is maybe putting it mildly. The text uses some pretty heavy hitters as case studies. People like Steve Bannon, Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. But here's our mission for this deep dive. We aren't here to debate the politics of the people mentioned. We're not here to, take a side. We are here to unpack the argument this source is making. It claims there's a specific psychological pattern playing out in America right now, and it's leading to something it calls racial exile.
Which is such a striking term. It's not migration, not just moving. It's exile.
Exactly. So let's start where the source starts. It tries to show us what's behind that public mask we were just talking about. And it uses a really specific, almost bizarre example, an interview between Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. This is it's a fascinating place to begin. The source focuses on a documented interaction between these two men. Now, regardless of what you think of them as individuals.
And there's a lot to think.
Right. Bannon, this populist architect Epstein, this monstrous, disgraced figure, the source is really interested in the dynamic between them.
It calls their interaction a depiction of an unspoken ideology. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
You've got two guys who are, let's be honest, pretty far out on the fringe in terms of their moral compass. Is the source really saying that a private chat between these two represents some broader American reality? That feels like a huge stretch.
That's a fair pushback, and the source actually anticipates that. It argues that they aren't outliers when it comes to influence.
Okay.
At the time of their interaction, they represented this intersection of massive political power and massive financial secrets. The argument isn't that every American thinks like them.
Right.
The argument is that their private conversation is a window into the unspoken ideology of the elite class.
So it's about access, about power.
It's about the comfort of the closed door. The source argues that when the cameras are off, when the public isn't listening, the whole conversation about race just changes. It shifts from this public narrative of equality and progress to something much, much darker.
And the Bannon-Epstein thing is supposed to be a symbol of that.
It's the veil being lifted.
Okay, so the veil in the title, that's this barrier between what's said in public and what's actually believed in private.
Precisely. And the source suggests that this private sentiment, what powerful white men say about black people when they think no one is listening, is the foundation for everything else the text talks about.
But the text doesn't just call it racism, does it? It adds a qualifier. It calls it narcissistic racism. Now, when I hear narcissism, I think of, someone who takes too many selfies or something. How does that apply here?
This is probably the most critical intellectual leap in the source material. We need to kind of strip away the pop psychology definition of narcissism.
Okay.
In this context, the source is using narcissism to describe a mechanism of defense, of denial.
Walk me through that.
Okay, so imagine a classic narcissistic relationship. If a narcissist hurts you, and you turn to them and say, ouch, that hurt, what's their typical response?
They usually deny they did it, or they'll tell you you're being crazy for feeling hurt. I didn't hit you that hard, or you're just too sensitive.
Exactly. It's that Darvo cycle: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. The source argues that American racism operates on that exact same system.
Wow.
It's not just that prejudice exists, it's that when black people point out the prejudice, the system itself gaslights them.
So it's the denial of reality.
It's the complete refusal to admit that the harm even occurred. The source calls it a psychological dynamic. The perpetrator victimizes someone based on race and then just vehemently denies that the victimization happened.
It creates a loop.
It creates a loop where the victim is constantly forced to prove that their own reality is real.
That just sounds exhausting.
And that is the key word the source uses over and over: tired. It claims that Black people are tired of this specific dance. It's not just the oppression itself, but the psychological labor of dealing with a system that refuses to admit the oppression even exists.
It reminds me of that feeling when you're in an argument with someone who just will not listen.
Yeah.
Eventually, you just stop talking because it's not worth the energy.
Right. But now imagine that dynamic isn't just with a stubborn relative, but with your boss, with your government, the media, the police. The source argues that this narcissistic racism creates an environment that is psychologically uninhabitable.
And if your house becomes uninhabitable, you move.
You move. And this brings us right to the racial exile concept. The source draws a direct line from this psychological fatigue to a physical exit strategy.
This is the part I found really interesting because the source claims to have current data on this. When I look closer, the data it's citing is YouTube videos.
I know. In an academic paper, that might get you a failing grade. But wait, let's look at what the source is actually saying here. It's not citing, YouTube comments. It's citing a specific genre of video documentation.
You mean like travel vlogs, like top 10 places to retire?
It's deeper than that. The source describes this whole wave of content. You could call it the Blacksit genre, though the source uses broader terms. These are videos where Black Americans are documenting the entire process of packing up their lives and moving.
Where are they going?
Places like Portugal, Ghana, Costa Rica, Panama.
Okay, so these are testimonials, basically.
They're primary source testimonies, and the source argues that if you watch enough of them, you see a pattern that constitutes a form of data. These are not people saying, I want to try new food. They are saying explicitly, I cannot breathe in America anymore.
That's a heavy distinction, isn't it? It changes it from I'm an expat looking for adventure to I'm a refugee from a social system.
Exactly. And that's why the source insists on using the word exile. Exile is something forced on you. You don't choose it. You're driven into it. The argument here is that the narcissistic racism, that constant denial of humanity, is the force that's driving people out.
Can we paint a picture for the listener? What does the source say these videos actually look like?
It describes this palpable sense of relief. You see people who, the moment they land in a new country, they talk about their blood pressure going down. They talk about the absence of a gaze they didn't even realize they were living under back home.
Wow.
The source treats these videos as proof that the unspoken ideology has real-world casualties. It's a brain drain, sure, but it's also a kind of soul drain.
So we have the private ideology with Bannon and Epstein, and we have the reaction, which is the exile. But the source connects these two with a bridge. It argues that the private ideology doesn't stay private. It leaks out.
It has to.
And this brings us to the current event the text analyzes, the meme.
Right. And again, we have to navigate this carefully. The source brings up a specific incident where Donald Trump shared a meme depicting Barack and Michelle Obama.
And it wasn't just any meme. It depicted them as apes.
Yes.
As simians. Now, most people see that and think, okay, that's just offensive or that's clearly racist. But the source insists we need to look at it through a historical lens, not just a modern politeness lens.
This is where the analysis gets dark, but it's necessary. The source asks us to map this image explicitly to historical propaganda.
Okay.
Depicting Black people as apes or monkeys isn't just a simple insult like calling someone stupid. It's a centuries-old technology of dehumanization.
A technology of dehumanization. That's a chilling phrase.
It's accurate, though. Historically, this specific imagery was used during slavery and the Jim Crow era to argue that Black people were not fully human. If you can convince the public that a group of people are basically animals, you remove the moral obligation to treat them with rights or dignity or justice.
So, by sharing that meme, the source argues it wasn't just a bad joke. It was a signal.
It was a deployment of that historical weapon. And here's where it loops right back to the narcissism.
How so?
When that meme was shared, what was the reaction from that political camp? Was there an apology?
No.
Yeah.
From what I remember, it was just dismissed. It's just a joke, or you're reading too much into it.
Exactly. That is the narcissistic loop all over again. First, the dehumanization happens, the meme. Then the denial happens. It's just a joke. The source argues that this incident reveals what white people think of Black people.
Whoa. That is a massive generalization. What white people think. You mean all white people?
Yep.
Based on one meme?
I agree, it's a really sweeping claim. But let's look at the context of the argument. The source isn't saying every single white individual thinks this.
Okay.
It's arguing that the system, the structure that allows a former president to share that image without immediate, universal condemnation, reveals the underlying value system of the country.
I see.
It's saying, if this is acceptable behavior for a leader, then this is the accepted ideology of the nation.
So it's using the meme as barometer for the culture.
Correct. It connects the dots. The private contempt we saw with Bannon and Epstein has now bubbled up into the public square with the Trump meme. The veil has been ripped away. And for the Black Americans watching this all happen,
That's the signal to leave.
that's the signal that the social contract is broken. If the first Black president and first lady, the absolute pinnacle of achievement and respectability, can be reduced to animals in the public discourse, and half the country laughs or shrugs, then what safety is there for a regular person?
That really drives home the exile point. It's not about economics. You can have a great job, a nice car, live in a good neighborhood. But if the cultural atmosphere is toxic, you still suffocate.
And that's the fatigue the source mentions. You cannot earn your way out of that kind of dehumanization. You can only physically remove yourself from the environment.
It's just so interesting how the source weaves these three completely different things together. You've got a secret meeting in a mansion, a crude internet meme, and a YouTube blog from Portugal. On the surface, they have nothing to do with each other.
But the source argues they are the timeline. They are the life cycle of modern American racism.
A life cycle, okay.
Stage 1, the private ideology. The elites discussing the natural order behind closed doors. Stage 2, the public propaganda, the meme, testing the waters, dehumanizing the target. Stage 3, the denial, that narcissistic refusal to admit harm. And stage 4,
The exit.
the exit, the target group deciding they simply cannot play the game anymore.
It's a system, a feedback loop.
And it suggests that the exile isn't a retreat, it's a rejection. It's a vote of no confidence in the entire American project.
That brings up a big question about the future, though. If the source is right, and there is this steady stream of people leaving, often people who are educated, motivated, just looking for peace, what does that do to the place they leave behind?
That is the big unspoken variable here, isn't it? We talk about brain drain in economics, where the smart people leave a struggling economy. But this is something else. This is a moral drain.
A moral drain.
If the people who are most sensitive to injustice, who are most aware of the history, and who are arguably the most resilient, if they decide that America is a lost cause, who is left to fight for the soul of the country?
That is a haunting thought. It implies that by driving people out, the system actually reinforces itself. It just gets rid of the dissenters.
Which brings us right back to that Bannon and Epstein room. If everyone who disagrees with what's being said in that room leaves, then the unspoken ideology in that room becomes the only ideology left.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the psychology of narcissism to the history of propaganda to the modern reality of relocation.
It's a lot to process. Beyond the Veil forces you to look at racism not just as a series of bad laws or individual bad acts, but as a psychological climate.
And it challenges us to take these I'm leaving videos seriously. They're not just content. They're like the canary in the coal mine, aren't they?
Exactly. They are signaling that for a growing number of people, the cost of the American dream has just become too high.
So here's a question I want to leave you with today. We often think of citizenship as a given. You're born here, you live here, you die here. But the source suggests that citizenship is actually a contract, and contracts can be broken.
And if the data in this source is accurate, we are witnessing a breach of contract on a massive scale.
So ask yourself, if you felt that your country's culture was actively hostile to your existence and then denied it every single time you brought it up, would you stay and fight? Or would you find a new map?
That's the question.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. This was a heavy one, but an important one.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.